Hey, how's it going? What's going on? It's another one of those ones where you're listening to my voice and you're looking at my hands, and we're going to talk about and look at some figures. Yesterday we looked at some Marx army figures, some soldiers. Today we're going to look at some Marx Western figures. I'm pretty sure this is going to be all Marx stuff because I haven't opened these up yet. It's kind of dusty on top. These came from the back bedroom. You know that this keeps not sticking. I'm reorganizing, and this is not the best place for my figures, especially these ones from the early 50s. So what we're going to look at are the Western figures from the same time frame as those military figures we looked at yesterday, but today we'll look at the Western ones, and we'll start with this half calf special roast coffee can. I don't know what we're going to find. I didn't prepare for this. Just guessing what we're going to find, but I'm pretty sure what we're going to find in here are cowboy and Native American figures from the early 1950s. These two right here in particular are two of your most earliest Marx Western figures. Well, it's two of the same figure. You can tell how early they are because they don't have bases. See this? Also, they're not really made of plastic. I don't know if you can tell, but these figures are made of vinyl. This is vinyl. It's not plastic. This one's a little bit more rigid. This is, I think, the very first of this, and this is maybe a year or two later. It's a little bit harder, more plastic-like, but it is still this, it's just kind of dried up. It is still a vinyl, not plastic. See? But remember those sculpts from yesterday, the real soft military ones? So we're going to look at some Westerns today that are, some of them are very soft. This one is quite detailed. A lot of these poses that we'll look at, see, look at this, is one of the problems, but I think they do stand. You can get them to stand. Were used multiple times. Now, eventually they put bases on these. We'll probably come across a couple that have bases, but look, I can't get either one of these guys to stand. So, well, these guys go on horseback. Let's set them aside until we find a horse. Ooh, this is cool. So, what I was saying is some of these figures, these exact figures, the same mold, same size, and everything, were used as Marx Warriors of the World figures a few years later, and they made them out of hard plastic in the Hong Kong factory and painted them. But these are the first ones made by Marx in the United States. Look at the amazing detail on this native Indian brave. There's that thing. Okay, so we're going to find this. This is a telltale sign of Marx, this particular size and location, and these are vents that were underneath the mold to release air so that the figures wouldn't have air bubbles inside of them. These were all individually molded in metal molds. It was a mold that had, multiple figures in them, if you can imagine it. Probably, a cast would have been like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe on the other side 6. So maybe that's why there's 11 in the mold shoots sometimes. This is a beautiful figure. I don't know if you guys appreciate this stuff in the same way that I do, but maybe you do. You're watching the videos. Okay, let's look at these. These are really cool. Early 50s stuff, you guys. Early 50s. Like we're talking 52, 54, 56, but maybe not even that late. No expert, right? I mention this a lot. Not really an expert. Let's move these things out of here because we're gonna need room, and we're gonna make this a spectacular display of Western figures from the 1950s by the time we're done with it. I didn't really set up any background because I didn't want to detract from the focus. I thought about setting up, I've got play sets we could put in the background down here, and I could change the camera angle, and you could be looking at me or something, but I want to focus on these guys. Some of these poses would be modified and would become the figures that we would know in the 60s and 70s, some of these Indians. And I'm going to switch back and forth. Sometimes I'll call these Native American figures, but then sometimes I'll forget because I'm almost 60 years old, and I grew up playing cowboys and Indians, and I always wanted to be one of the Indians, especially a guy like this. Look at this perfect figure. This is like a 70-year-old toy. Somehow, some way it survived. This bowstring is almost always broken. That feather on the top of his head, that's almost always chewed off or missing. Look at the amazing detail on this. This is just positively beautiful. These are a yellow. I don't know if you guys can see this, but they're a soft, like, what would you call this? Like a lemon chiffon. And these guys, one more time. Can you stand up there, cowboy? No, you really can't. The best thing to do with them is lean them up against a fence. Oh, this is an interesting example of me doing weird stuff at the beginning when I really didn't care. And I would still do this maybe nowadays, but in a lot of old figures, one time I received this Timmy Pioneer figure. He's pretty large, like 60 millimeter or something. And he was broken. Didn't have a rifle. He was broken, just the gray plastic. So I took a shotgun from the Marx accessories and I glued it there. So now it doesn't look half bad, but it's definitely not a vintage cool type of figure that I like. It's just mixed in here. Not really purposefully, it's just here. It's not part of this video because we're looking at Marx Western figures. Right now we're looking at these amazing Native Americans in a lemon chiffon. I don't know what this color is. It's like a light. What is this? It's like such a subdued yellow. Pastel? Is this a pastel yellow? What's on his knee? Maybe he was glued down to something? Whatever it is, it looks like it'll come off. Look at that incredible face. So this is Marx. This is the Marx art department, probably in 1952. And they're really playing to what's popular. Television is new, and kids are watching a lot of TV westerns. Very popular genre of television and comic books and everything, movies. So, of course, Marx is going to jump onto the Western bandwagon, and kids must have just loved this. How cool is this guy? Look at this. It's similar to the stuff we looked at yesterday, as I mentioned. It's a soft sculpt. Look, somebody shot him again. This was a thing. Kids, I think these are safety pins. Kids would stick them with safety pins, or is that a blowgun? I've found more than a couple figures that have these little holes in them like this. So it's still got that soft sculpt as you see, but it is definitely more detailed than those. This is a cavalry horse. Let's set that aside. These are some odd figures that, once again, are not Marx. Let's just set them aside. Well, you know what? Let's look at them real quick. I don't remember what these are. Let's take a peek at them. But I don't believe they're Marx. They're something else, but they're also old. Look at this guy. This guy has a purple bandana concealing his identity, like he is a bandit. Looks like he's got a gun here. Looks like these guns are broken off a bit. Nothing on the bottom. I looked these up. I looked these up years ago. This is a little painted MPC, I think. Civil War soldier. Oh, this guy's name is Black Kettle. That's why it says that right there. This is a figure with a name because this figure eventually was turned into one of the Warriors of the World figures that came with the cards and were made of the hard plastic and they were painted. And he was named Black Kettle and he was given a backstory. Now, I don't have that Warrior of the World figure, but I do have the original Black Kettle, which is an amazing figure. Beautiful. This is vinyl, just like the cowboys that we looked at that couldn't stand up at the beginning. Let's see if he can stand up. Looks like there's some schmutz back in there inside of his headdress. Let's see if Black Kettle will stand up. He does. He stands up perfectly, and he looks really great. Sorry the camera is so high at this angle. This is a Britain's figure. Thought there was going to be more Marx in here, but we're finding a lot of mixed stuff. I hope you don't mind. This is a Britain's figure. It's number 151, made in Hong Kong. This came with a little set of native figures, I think from the 60s, late 60s. Came painted like this. This is a peace pipe that was broken, and I modified it, and I put this piece of black plastic and glued it on there to make it look like a peace pipe now that is a tomahawk, but the original figure doesn't look like this. So again, you know, me doing my funny little thing. Here's a well. It's an original piece. We don't need to pull that out and look at it. It's just part of a play set. Here's a cavalry figure, a Marx cavalry figure with a drawn saber in one of these horses that I didn't like all that much when I was a kid, but I like it now. When I was a kid, I really didn't care for this horse that much. I didn't like the look on his face, and I didn't like the way his legs were, the way that he falls down pretty easily, and sometimes you have to bend his legs. This one's doing a good job, though. But one thing I did like about it is these stirrups that held the figures on really well. This guy holds on very well. He's in a metallic blue. This, I think, is a Union cavalry trooper. Okay, this is some more early 50s Marx Western playset figures that are just a mixture. Now, these could have come from all different places. I don't remember where I bought them, but most of them probably came in a large lot. And they're just pieces of different play sets or different groupings of figures that survived somehow and ended up in my possession. Like this guy, this kid, who looks like he's running towards the fray. I really like this figure. It's a later figure, later 50s. Now here's an early figure. This is a seated guy that looks like it may, I mean, this probably came from like the Roy Rogers play set. Is this supposed to be Roy Rogers? I don't really know. I'm not sure, but it's a really cool figure. Look at the chaps. So he's supposed to sit on a carriage or a barrel or a fence. He's very nice. Or a buckboard. He's got an interesting look on his face. He's smiling, holding his hat. I wonder if that's supposed to be Roy. That's cool. I don't know for sure. This is an interesting figure. This is a cowboy, I believe, that is surrendering. He's being held at gunpoint. That's what's happening here. This is, again, that yellow plastic from the mid-50s. Maybe from the same set that those native figures came from. Maybe a Western town set or something. His yellow looks a little bit different. He is different. This is not the same yellow. I don't know how good the lighting is on this video, but this is not the same. These are not the same. These Indians came together, and this cowboy did not come with them. I don't believe he's the same plastic. Different plastic, but still Marx, still the same time period. It's still really old. Now, I like this stuff. You know, I like Western movies and television shows, and I like, especially these days, in the past few years, I've really gotten into reading Golden Age comic books from the 1950s. Comics that were being produced and sold to kids the exact same time as the figures that we're looking at. Now, Marx was almost like the Dell Comics of toys. They had licensing for everything. Just like Dell Comics made Roy Rogers comic books, Marx Toys had the licensing to make Roy Rogers toys, and so play sets. So they made Roy Rogers play sets, as well as all different kind. Oh, this guy's nose has been messed with. This guy is like from the 70s or the late 60s, I believe. Ooh, here's some old horses. These are nice. Let's see if we can't pair these up with those two riders that we found at the beginning. All right, so these are early era horses. early era, early 1950s Marx. Beautiful. Really cool. You may never have seen these before. If you're a kid of the 60s and the 70s, we didn't play with these. Unless you had older siblings and this stuff was still hanging around, this is not the same cowboys and Indian sets that I had in the late 60s and in early and mid 70s. I had never seen these before until recent, until a few years ago when I started buying this old stuff. 1950s toys to go with those 1950s comic books that we love to read. This is not a riding figure. This is a riding figure. Now, this looks like he's supposed to go on a bucking horse, but he can still go on this horse. But I think he's supposed to go on a horse that we're going to come across in a second that's bucking. Although you can make this horse buck, I think. Can you? Yeah, you sure can. This guy looks like he's supposed to be on a horse. He is. This guy's supposed to be riding a bull, right? This is a rodeo set. He's no hands riding. He could be riding this horse, but that's what's happening here. I believe that's what's happening here. He's a no hands rider. This is a trick riders. Those two guys are trick riders, rodeo riders. That's what this is. I don't know if these are the horses that go with them, but these are rodeo rider, clearly, aren't they? That might be some sort of rodeo playset. Very cool. Okay, we're familiar with these. These are the Marx, I think, Civil War or maybe Pioneers, or I think some of these are Civil War, and some of these are the Boonesboro Pioneers from the 60s, I think. Start with this guy that's got a turkey. This is a great figure. It's a mountain man that is holding a turkey. He's got his flintlock rifle over his shoulder. Very detailed, beautiful figure. And this is Marx. See, look at, there's some telltale Marx signs at the bottom that we can spot. How about right there? Let's get them all in picture, in camera. Same set as that last guy. He's running, similar to the other one that we saw, except he has a coonskin cap and he's running towards the fight. I love it. Here's a cavalry trooper with his nose pushed in. This is from the set, the same set as those other ones that we saw, but this is like the 1970s or 1960s. Can you guys hear my neighbor's dog is barking? I hope that's not distracting or bothering you. We have more to go through, but hang on a second. It was distracting and bothering me, so I had to close the window and I switched the lights so we got a little bit more light. Let's move this out of the way. Let's go to the next bin. It is a coffee container. Let's take this really nice white horse and put it underneath this cavalry trooper. You may have noticed that I keep these figures in bags. I don't know why I did that. Just to keep them separate and to keep track of them, because I was collecting this stuff really closely at the beginning, but now, I don't know, I still would want to keep it separate, especially, and this is old stuff, but it is kind of odd that I had it all bagged up individually, isn't it? That's kind of what collectors do, though. See, they're all like this. Hey, this is our first Confederate soldier that we found. This is a black horse, and it looks like this is a really neat figure. Confederate officer that somebody poked him in the eyes with a pin. See that? I don't think those are supposed to look like that. I don't think so. Look at the detail on this, though. It's a very nice figure. This is early. Yeah, this is early. Like, this is late 50s, I think. Maybe even earlier. Mid-50s. Are you seeing the differences Like, there's a lot to this stuff. I mean, they made a lot of these figures, and you can look it up and search it and stuff, and study it and learn about it. But once you've seen what they look like, this is one of my all-time favorite, if not my favorite Marx Western figure. I have two examples here. These are early gen. This is called the Battling Cowboy. It's one of my all-time favorite figures. He is made of vinyl, early, like maybe 1952 or something. He's fighting. Look at this. This would have come with some sort of multiple different play sets, like the Western Town or the Rodeo, or I don't know. There were different play sets at this time that Marx was putting these figures into, I think. There's a multiple different ways that you could have first been exposed to the battling cowboy. Look at the look on his face. This is a little bit, I don't know if this is earlier or later than that other figure, but it's also vinyl. Can you tell by looking at it on camera? So it feels and smells and it looks completely different in hand, but I'm not sure what the camera will be able to pick up. But the quality of the material in this early stuff, you can tell that of what it is just by looking at it. So this is a vinyl figure as opposed to, like, say, let's look at this. This is a plastic figure that would have come later, like I was saying. This is something that we would have played with in the late 60s or early 70s or maybe mid 60s. Maybe even early 60s. But this was the first stuff that they were making at the, this is Marx, the first Marx cowboy figures. This is what they looked like. And this is the material they were made of, was a vinyl. Soft vinyl. This is a really neat figure that reminds me of that nurse that we saw yesterday. And it is this Native American woman, also very delicate with the feathers at the top. Could have easily been broken or chewed off, but someone took care of it. Somehow it survived. There's nothing on the bottom. It's a solid piece. And it's beautiful. And now she has that, this is that soft sculpt that we see with this early Marx stuff, where a lot of their faces are very similar. This is a great, I love this figure. So cool. Let's move this sitting guy. Hey, here's one of the rodeo horses. See, look at this. Isn't that beautiful? Might not be right. It might not fit perfect. I feel like he fits better on the other one, but isn't that a beautiful horse? Plastic on these horses also feels different, softer. Here's a great example of that. I'm glad that I mentioned that, because here's a horse that is here's a horse of a different color. He looks like he's kind of dirty still. He could be washed, but maybe that's as good as it gets. So he's a gray, but he's like a soft. It's a different, I'm not sure. Probably from the same shoot as these other ones. It's just gray. Just feels and looks a bit different. Here's another one of the cavalry horses. It's a nice color. I like this color. A little bit different. It's the tan. So these would come in black, brown, white, and tan. We have them all here. Here's a tan one. Here's a brown one. Here's a black one. And here's the white one. That's neat, huh? Well, these are neat. Here's some more native figures that are in. This is a good example showing. So here's one that, okay, so he goes on horseback. He's cool. I think he'll also stand even when he's not on horseback. Yeah, he will. Perfectly. And then here's a later version of the exact same figure except in red. Would have come a couple years later. And that's what we're going to get into now. Because it looks like we have a lot of red figures. Some of them are the same sculpts we've already looked at. These are later. These are late 50s, early 60s. I don't even feel like pulling those out of the bag because they're not that interesting, but I'm getting tired. We're almost at 26 minutes. We're at 26 minutes. So I'm just going to pull out the coolest stuff. This is something early. It's really neat. It's this horse that's in full running stride that you don't typically see. And then this brave that's been stuck with a pin a couple times. He's drawing an arrow and he's interesting. He's like little. Look at it. Somebody really shot him up. But he's made specifically for this horse. They fit together perfectly. They're together. They're a piece. And this is really cool. I love this. This is old. Early 1950s. Marx. Almost everything other than those weird pieces we looked at before, it's all Marx. Here's a good comparison that we can see. Since we only have 5 minutes left, I'm just going to fly through the last few pieces. But I have in this bag a situation where you can see early Native American figure that's beautiful from probably 1954, and then later, 1956 or 58 or 1960. Don't know. Some red figures. This one in particular, this brutal one where this guy's getting shot with an arrow in the side. See that? And then somebody stuck a bunch of pins in him. Flying through, but there's certain ones we got to pull out and look at. This is another one of my favorite figures. We got a couple early examples of it here. Early one, you can tell because there's no base, and he's made of vinyl. Look at how cool and soft he is. One of my favorite figures, you guys. This is a beautiful Native American toy. I think it's so cool. He stands perfectly without a base. And then here he is a couple years later in a soft white early plastic from Marx with a base. And he stands easier, I'm sure. All right, so the last one we're going to look at is a red plastic charging Indian brave. I think we saw this earlier on in the yellow or the tan, but this is something from later, but still not a figure that we would have grown up with in the late 60s, early 70s. This is a Marx Indian figure from a set from late 50s, early 60s, maybe not even the 60s. I have to look it up, but this is still an early one. Even though it's made of this red plastic, this is the end of the 50s, I think. Maybe 58 or something. I don't know. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed looking at all these fantastic and wild and different Marx Western figures from the 1950s. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.